The Billionaire'S Triplets never walked or spoke. Until the new Maid's secret act made doctors question everything. Vincent Hartwell's Bentley crunched over the gravel driveway that Thursday evening, and something made him pause before cutting the engine. Music. Classical piano drifting through the evening air. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. He sat frozen in the driver's seat. No one had played music in this house for 4 years, not since Natalie died. Vincent grabbed his briefcase and walked toward the sound. It was coming from the garden. His pulse quickened with each step. Through the stone archway, past the rose bushes Natalie had planted, and then he saw something that made his briefcase slip from his hand and hit the stone path with a dull thud. His 3 daughters, Grace, Hope, and Faith, were on a purple blanket spread across the manicured lawn. The girls who hadn't taken a single step in 4 years, who hadn't spoken a single word since they were 8 months old, were moving. Grace's hand was reaching up. Faith was clapping. Hope was rocking side to side like her body was remembering something it had forgotten. Standing beside them was Kiara Osei, the new maid he'd hired 2 weeks ago. Her black uniform with the orange trim stood out against the green grass. She was singing, badly, off-key, but she was smiling, guiding their little hands through motions Vincent hadn't seen since. He couldn't even remember when. For the first time since the day Natalie's heart stopped beating on an operating table, Vincent Hartwell felt something crack open inside his chest. Something dangerous. Something that felt like hope. Let me tell you how we got here. Because this story will shatter everything you think you know about grief, guilt, and what it means to truly see the people you love. 4 years ago, Vincent Hartwell lost his wife during what was supposed to be routine surgery. Natalie had been healthy, vibrant, laughing over breakfast that morning about their daughter's upcoming first birthday party. She kissed him goodbye at the hospital entrance and said, "I'll see you in a few hours." Then an anesthesia complication stopped her heart on the operating table. The doctors tried everything. They couldn't bring her back. The triplets were only 8 months old. Vincent threw himself into work. Hartwell Industries needed him. The board needed him. The investors, the employees, the legacy his father had built and his wife had helped him expand. It all needed him. What he didn't realize, what he couldn't see through the fog of his grief, was that Grace, Hope, and Faith needed him more. By the time the girls turned 2, they still weren't walking. They weren't talking. They sat in their adaptive chairs with blank expressions, staring at walls, unresponsive to toys, to voices, even to each other. It was like they were present, but not really there. Like they'd learned to exist without living. Vincent hired the best specialists money could buy. Neurologists flew in from Switzerland. Developmental pediatricians from Johns Hopkins examined them for weeks. Genetic specialists from Boston ran every test known to modern medicine. The bills topped $1 million. Every test came back normal. Brain scans, normal. Genetic panels, normal. Hearing, vision, reflexes, all normal. "Your daughters are physically healthy, Mr. Hartwell," the 27th specialist told him, a woman with kind eyes and 20 years of experience. But emotionally, they're starving. Children this young need more than food and shelter. They need connection, engagement, joy. They're reflecting the emotional environment they're living in. Do you understand what I'm saying? Vincent showed her to the door and never called her back. He cycled through nannies like seasons. Some lasted 3 months, others quit after 3 weeks. They just sit there. One complained during her exit interview. It's like they're not even real children. It's creepy. Vincent fired her on the spot and hired the next one. His daughters turned 4 years old. 4 years without a single step. 4 years without a single word. And Vincent had convinced himself this was just how it was going to be. This was the price he had to pay for surviving when Natalie didn't. Then Kiara Osei walked into his life. She showed up for the interview in a crisp, pressed uniform, her resume listing only housekeeping experience and childcare references. Vincent barely looked at her. He was already late for a conference call with the Singapore office. "The position is primarily for childcare," he said, not looking up from his phone. "You understand these children have special needs?" "I understand, sir," Kiara said quietly, her accent carrying a slight lilt he couldn't quite place. "I'm very good at seeing what others miss." Something in her voice made Vincent glance up. She was young, maybe late 20s, but there was something in her eyes. A kind of knowing, a kind of sadness that matched his own. He should have asked more questions. He should have dug deeper. But he was late, and she seemed competent. And honestly, he didn't have the energy to interview anyone else. "You start Monday," he said. What Vincent didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that Kiara Osei wasn't just a housekeeper desperate for work. She had a master's degree in child psychology with specialization in selective mutism and developmental trauma. She'd worked at a prestigious children's hospital in Philadelphia until 2 years ago, when her younger sister Amara was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The medical bills had drained everything. Her savings, her retirement, everything she'd worked for. She'd taken cash-pay housekeeping jobs to cover the treatments, keeping her credentials quiet because most wealthy families didn't want overqualified staff who might question their parenting choices. When the Hartwell estate listing crossed her desk, $15,000 a month, live-in position, caring for 3 children with unexplained developmental delays, Kiara had almost passed. She was tired. Tired of watching other people's pain, tired of carrying her own. But she needed the money. Amara needed the money. So she came. The day she met Grace, Hope, and Faith, something broke inside her chest. 3 beautiful little girls with curly blonde hair and big eyes that should have been full of wonder. Instead, they sat in their adaptive chairs like dolls, not moving, not speaking, just existing. "Hi, sweethearts," Kiara whispered, kneeling in front of them. "My name is Kiara." They didn't respond. But their eyes, God, their eyes were screaming. "Before I show you what happened next, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because stories like this, stories about broken people finding their way back to hope, they don't get told unless people like you decide they matter. And right now, somewhere in the world, there's a parent who's drowning in grief, just like Vincent was. A parent who needs to know it's not too late. Your subscription, your comment, your simple act of engagement could be the algorithm's way of putting this story in front of the exact person who needs it today. So don't scroll past this moment. Subscribe. Comment where you're from. You might just save a family without even knowing it. Now let us continue. Kiara's first week at the Hartwell estate was unremarkable by design. She woke at 5:30 a.m. in her quarters, a modest but comfortable room above the garage with a window overlooking the garden. She showered, dressed in her uniform, and was in the kitchen by 6 a.m., preparing breakfast for 3 little girls who wouldn't eat it. Not really. Grace, Hope, and Faith sat in their adaptive chairs at the kitchen table like porcelain dolls arranged for display. The chairs had padded sides to keep them upright, straps across their chests to prevent them from slumping forward. They wore matching purple dresses, someone's attempt at making them look cheerful, perhaps. But the effect was heartbreaking. Kiara prepared oatmeal the way the previous nanny had written in the notes. Mashed with banana, no sugar, lukewarm temperature. She sat in front of Grace first, the oldest by 7 minutes, according to the birth records. "Good morning, sweetheart," Kiara said softly, lifting a small spoon. "I made your favorite." Grace stared past her. Not at her, past her. Like Kiara was a ghost in her own life. The feeding process was mechanical. Open mouth, insert spoon, wait for swallow, repeat. Grace accepted the food without resistance, but also without presence. She was there but not there. A body going through motions it had been trained to perform. Hope was next. Then faith. The entire breakfast took 45 minutes. Not because the girls were slow eaters, but because Kiara kept pausing, watching them, searching for something. A flicker of awareness, a spark of interest. Anything that suggested someone was home behind those vacant eyes. She found nothing. After breakfast, Kiara cleaned. She wiped down counters that were already spotless. She organized pantry shelves that were already organized. The Hartwell estate was a showpiece, beautiful, expensive, and utterly lifeless. Like a museum where people happened to sleep. Vincent left for work at 7:15 a.m. every morning. He came down the stairs in expensive suits, carrying his briefcase, already on his phone. He never looked at his daughters. Never said good morning, never asked how they'd slept. On her third day, Kiara tested something. She positioned the girls' chairs in the foyer where Vincent would have to walk past them to leave. She wanted to see what he would do. He walked around them, didn't break stride, didn't break his phone conversation, just altered his path slightly and continued out the door. Kiara understood then. Vincent Hartwell wasn't avoiding his daughters because he didn't love them. He was avoiding them because he loved them too much, and loving them hurt more than he could bear. The days followed the same pattern. Feed the girls, clean the house, sit with the girls in the playroom while they stared at toys they never touched. Feed them lunch. Put them down for naps in their beds. 3 identical cribs in 3 identical rooms, each decorated in soft pastels that Natalie had probably chosen before she died. Kiara never complained, never asked Vincent questions about routines or preferences, never showed pity when she looked at Grace, Hope, and Faith. What she did show was curiosity. She watched them the way a scientist watches a fascinating puzzle. She noticed that Faith's eyes tracked sounds. When the refrigerator hummed, when a car drove past, when birds sang outside the window. She noticed that Hope responded slightly to touch, her breathing changing when Kiara stroked her arm. She noticed that Grace watched faces, her gaze following whoever was speaking, even though she gave no other sign of awareness. They weren't gone. They were trapped. Vincent noticed Kiara's behavior, though he'd never admit it. He watched her on the security cameras in his office, footage he told himself he was reviewing for safety purposes, but really watched because he couldn't help himself. He saw her sitting on the floor with the girls, arranging toys they wouldn't play with, saw her reading them books they wouldn't respond to, saw her singing softly while she combed their hair, even though they gave no indication they heard her. She never got frustrated, never got impatient, never treated them like the lost causes every specialist had implied they were. Vincent didn't know what to do with that. So he did what he'd been doing for 4 years. He avoided it. He left earlier in the mornings, returned later in the evenings. Ate dinner in his office while reviewing contracts he barely saw because his mind was stuck on the monitor showing Kiara sitting with his daughters. On Friday evening, The household manager, Mrs. Morrison, stopped by Vincent's office. She was a severe woman in her 60s, who'd been with the family for 15 years. "The new girl is working out well," Mrs. Morrison said without preamble. "She's punctual, thorough, doesn't ask unnecessary questions." "Good," Vincent said without looking up from his laptop. "She talks to them." Vincent's fingers paused on the keyboard. "What? The girls?" "She talks to them all day, like they're having conversations. That's her job, to care for them." "No." Mrs. Morrison's voice carried a strange tone Vincent couldn't identify. "She talks to them like they're there, like they understand. I heard her yesterday telling them about her sister, about growing up in Philadelphia, about her favorite books. Just talking. Like they were normal children." Vincent felt something uncomfortable shift in his chest. "Is there a problem with that?" "No, sir. I just thought you should know. It's different from the other nannies. They treated the girls like—" She trailed off. "Like what?" "Like duties. Tasks to complete. Kiara treats them like people." After Mrs. Morrison left, Vincent pulled up the security footage from that afternoon. He watched Kiara in the playroom with the girls, her mouth moving, her hands animated. He turned on the audio. "And then my sister, Amara. She's 12 years younger than me. She used to climb this big oak tree in our backyard," Kiara was saying to Faith, who sat motionless in her chair. "Our mother would have a heart attack every time. But Amara wasn't scared of anything. Not heights, not scraped knees, not even that mean dog that lived next door. She was fearless." Kiara's voice caught slightly. "She's still fearless, even now. Even when things are so hard, she's braver than I'll ever be." Faith, of course, didn't respond. But Kiara continued anyway, telling stories to silence, offering pieces of herself to children who couldn't offer anything back. Vincent closed the laptop. He didn't know what to feel about any of it. That night, Kiara lay in her narrow bed above the garage, staring at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. It hadn't come easily all week. She kept seeing them. Grace, Hope, and Faith. 3 4-year-old girls with everything they could ever need. Beautiful clothes, expensive toys, a mansion with a garden that looked like something from a fairy tale. And nothing that mattered. No laughter, no joy, no life. Kiara rolled onto her side, pulling the thin blanket up to her chin. Her phone sat on the nightstand, the screen dark. She'd gotten a text from her mother earlier. "Amara's counts are down again. Doctor wants to adjust treatment. Stay strong, baby. We're trusting God. $15,000 a month. That's what this job paid." With that kind of money, Amara could get the experimental treatment the insurance refused to cover. Could get the better facility. Could have a fighting chance. All Kiara had to do was follow the rules. Keep the girls fed, clean, safe. Don't overstep. Don't interfere. Don't question the father who couldn't look at his own children without his face shutting down like someone had flipped a switch. But how could she do that? She'd spent 5 years learning how to help children like Grace, Hope, and Faith. Children who'd retreated so far inside themselves that the world thought they were gone. She knew what she was looking at, knew what it meant, knew what could be done about it if someone was willing to try. But it's not your place, she told herself. You're the housekeeper, that's all. Take the money. Help Amara. That's why you're here. Except that wasn't entirely true, was it? Kiara sat up, her heart pounding in the darkness. She pulled her knees to her chest and wrapped her arms around them, the way she used to do as a child when she was scared. God. She whispered into the empty room. I don't know why you brought me here. I don't know what you want me to do. I needed a job, and you gave me one. I needed money for Amara, and you provided it. She paused, tears burning behind her eyes. But I can't look at those little girls and do nothing. I can't watch them disappear while their father drowns in his grief. I can't. Even if it costs me everything, I can't. The room was silent, except for the distant sound of wind moving through the trees outside. Kiara pressed her forehead to her knees. If you brought me here for a reason, show me what to do. Show me how to help them. Please, I'm begging you, just show me. She sat there for a long time, waiting for something, a sign, a feeling, an answer. What she got was a memory. Her professor at Penn, Dr. Hathaway, lecturing about developmental trauma in children. Sometimes, he'd said, healing doesn't start with the child. It starts with understanding what broke them in the first place. Find the wound. Find what they lost. That's where you begin. What broke these girls? Kiara already knew the answer. They'd lost their mother. But more than that, they'd lost their father too. He was right here in this house, but he was gone. Locked away in his grief so completely that his daughters had locked themselves away too, mirroring his pain, reflecting his absence. Find what they lost. Kiara lifted her head, her mind suddenly sharp. If she wanted to save Grace, hope, and faith, she couldn't just reach them. She had to reach him first. She had to find out who Vincent Hartwell was before grief turned him to stone. Who Natalie was. What this family had been before tragedy tore it apart. She needed to understand what they'd lost. And maybe, just maybe, find a way to help them remember what it meant to live. Kiara lay back down, her heart still pounding but her mind finally quiet. She didn't have a plan yet, didn't know how she'd do any of it without crossing lines that would get her fired. But she knew one thing for certain. She hadn't come to this house by accident. God had brought her here for those 3 little girls, and she wasn't going to let them down. Vincent left the office at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, something he hadn't done in 4 years. His CFO had looked at him like he'd announced his retirement. Are you feeling all right, sir? Fine, Vincent had said, closing his laptop with more force than necessary. I need to check on something at home. He didn't know what made him leave. Maybe it was the unease that had been building all week. Maybe it was Mrs. Morrison's comment about Kiara talking to the girls like they were real people. Maybe it was the footage he'd been watching on the security cameras, seeing Kiara do things with his daughters that looked less like caregiving and more like something else. Something structured, intentional. As Vincent pulled through the gates of his estate, he heard it again. Not music this time, humming. A low, rhythmic sound drifting through the afternoon air. He parked the Bentley and followed the sound to the playroom on the main floor. The door was half open. Vincent approached quietly, some instinct telling him not to announce himself. What he saw through the gap made him freeze. Grace, Hope, and Faith were arranged in a semicircle on the floor, supported by cushions. Kiara knelt in front of them with a set of wooden blocks, red, blue, yellow, green, each about the size of her palm. She wasn't playing. She was testing. Vincent watched as she held up a red block in her right hand and a blue block in her left. She moved them in opposing directions, red left, blue right, then paused. Her eyes tracked Faith's gaze. She made a note on a pad beside her, then she did it again, this time faster. Red left, blue right, both disappearing behind her back. She watched which direction each girl's eyes moved, made more notes. "Very good, Hope," Kiara murmured. "Your tracking is improving. Did you see that, sweetheart? You followed it all the way." Hope, of course, gave no response. But Kiara continued as if she had, rearranging the blocks into a new pattern, alternating colors in a sequence. She held them up one at a time, testing recognition, measuring response time, documenting everything with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Vincent's jaw tightened. This wasn't random play. This was assessment. Structured developmental assessment. He pushed open the door. "What are you doing?" Kiara's head snapped up, her eyes wide. She scrambled to her feet, nearly knocking over the blocks. "Mr. Hartwell, I didn't... You're home early." Vincent stepped into the room, his gaze moving from Kiara to the notepad on the floor, to the carefully arranged blocks, to his daughters sitting in their semicircle like subjects in an experiment. "I asked you a question. What are you doing?" "I was just..." Kiara's hands twisted together. "We were playing with blocks. The girls seem to enjoy... Don't." Vincent's voice cut through the air like ice. "Don't insult my intelligence. That's not play. That's assessment. You're measuring their eye movements, tracking developmental responses, testing them." The color drained from Kiara's face. Vincent picked up the notepad. His eyes scanned the notes, detailed observations written in clinical shorthand. F. Tracks bilateral movement, 3-second delay. H. Shows preferential attention to warm colors. G. Sustained eye contact. 8 seconds. Longest observed. His hands clenched around the paper. "What the hell is this?" "Mr. Hartwell, I can explain." "Then explain." He turned to face her fully, and whatever she saw in his expression made her take a step back. "Because, from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been conducting unauthorized psychological assessments on my daughters. In my house, behind my back." Kiara's shoulders dropped. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then quietly, "You're right. I have been." Vincent hadn't expected honesty. It threw him off balance. "Why?" "Because I know what's wrong with them." Kiara's voice was steady now, stronger. "And it's not medical, Mr. Hartwell. It never was. You're a housekeeper. You have no qualifications to..." "I have a master's degree in child psychology from the University of Pennsylvania," Kiara interrupted. "Specialization in selective mutism and developmental trauma. I worked at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia for 5 years before I took this job. I've treated over 100 children with conditions similar to what your daughters are experiencing." Vincent stared at her, his mind struggling to process what he was hearing. "You lied on your application." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I needed the job." Kiara's eyes were bright with emotion, but her voice didn't waver. "My younger sister has leukemia, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The treatments are destroying my family financially. Most wealthy families don't want overqualified staff who might question their parenting decisions. So I simplified my resume. I took the work I could get." Vincent's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. So this was what? Some kind of social experiment? Get into my house under false pretenses so you could study my daughters like lab rats? No. Kiara took a step forward, her fear replaced by something fiercer. "I took this job because I needed the money. But I stayed because those 3 little girls upstairs are dying, Mr. Hartwell. Not physically, they're perfectly healthy, just like every specialist told you. But they're dying inside. And I know why. Enlighten me." Vincent's voice dripped with sarcasm and something darker. Fear he refused to acknowledge. "They're mirroring you." Kiara's words landed like stones in still water. Every specialist who examined them was right. Your daughters are trapped in the same prison you built for yourself when your wife died. Children don't learn to live by watching the world. They learn by watching their parents. And what have Grace, Hope, and Faith been watching for 4 years? A father who won't look at them, won't touch them, won't speak to them. A father who's so locked in his grief that he's become a ghost in his own house. Vincent's hands started to shake. You don't know what you're talking about? I know they're 4 years old and they've never heard their father laugh. I know you leave before they wake up and come home after they're asleep. I know you watch them on security cameras, but you haven't been in their rooms in months, maybe years. I know you hired me to keep them alive, but you never asked me to help them live. Because there's nothing to be done. Vincent's voice rose, something cracking in his carefully controlled demeanor. 27 specialists, $1 million in consultations, every test known to modern medicine. They all said the same thing. There's nothing physically wrong. So what exactly do you think you can fix with your blocks and your notes and your psychology degree? The thing you're too terrified to face. Kiara's voice dropped, but it cut through the room like a blade. You, Mr. Hartwell. They don't need more doctors. They don't need more tests. They need you. They need their father to stop hiding from his pain long enough to see that he's drowning his daughters in it. The words hung in the air between them, brutal and undeniable. Vincent felt something inside him crack, not break, but crack. And what leaked through that crack wasn't grief. It was rage. You lied on your application, he said, his voice cold and flat. You gained access to my home, to my children, under false pretenses. You've been conducting unauthorized assessments without my knowledge or consent. You violated every boundary I set when I hired you. Mr. Hartwell, get out. Kiara went pale. Please, if you would just listen. Get out, Vincent repeated, louder now. Pack your things and leave. Tonight. They're showing you what grief looks like from the outside. Kiara said, her voice suddenly fierce, unflinching. Every time they sit in those chairs with empty eyes, every time they don't respond to your voice, every time they exist without living, they're holding up a mirror. And until you break free from the prison you've built, neither will they. Is that what you want? To watch them disappear completely? To have 3 beautiful daughters who turn into nothing more than breathing statues because you were too afraid to feel your pain? Get out and never come back. The finality in his voice left no room for argument. Kiara's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. She looked at Grace, Hope, and Faith, still sitting in their semicircle, oblivious to the storm raging around them. And something broke across her face. I'm sorry, she whispered, not to Vincent, to them. I'm so sorry, sweethearts. I tried. She gathered her notepad, her blocks, her things. When she passed Vincent in the doorway, she stopped and looked up at him. For a moment, he thought she might say something else. Might make one more attempt to break through the walls he'd spent 4 years building. But she didn't. She just walked out. Vincent stood in the playroom for a long time after she left, surrounded by the scattered blocks and cushions, his daughters sitting in silence behind him. His hands were shaking. His chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped bands around his ribs and was pulling them tighter with each breath. She was wrong. She had to be wrong. But even as he thought it, he knew. Somewhere deep in the part of himself, he'd locked away with Natalie's memory. He knew Kiara was right about everything. And that terrified him more than anything else ever had. Vincent walked to where his daughter sat. He lowered himself to the floor in front of Grace, his oldest. She looked at him with those wide, empty eyes that used to be so full of life when she was a baby, before Natalie died, before grief turned this house into a tomb. "I don't know how to fix this," he whispered to her, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to fix any of it." Grace didn't respond. She just stared past him, through him, at nothing. Vincent stood up, his legs unsteady. He walked out of the playroom and up the stairs to his office, closed the door, pulled up the security footage and watched it all again. Kiara with the blocks, testing his daughters, documenting their tiny responses like they were precious treasures. He watched it 17 times, and every time he saw what he'd been refusing to see for 4 years. His daughters weren't broken. They were just waiting for permission to be alive again. By the time the sun set, Kiara's car had disappeared down the driveway. Mrs. Morrison came to tell him the new caregiver had left, that they'd need to post the position again. Vincent nodded without speaking. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat in his office with the lights off, staring at nothing, Kiara's words echoing in his head, like a curse he couldn't shake. "They're showing you what grief looks like from the outside." And somewhere in the quiet darkness of his daughter's rooms, Grace, Hope, and Faith slept like they always did. Perfectly still, perfectly silent, perfectly lost. Waiting for a father who didn't know how to find them. Vincent couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed, the bed he'd once shared with Natalie, staring at the ceiling, watching shadows from the security lights outside move across the plaster. It was 11:47 p.m., then midnight, then 12:30. Kiara's words kept circling through his mind like vultures. "When's the last time you held them?" He tried to be angry, had spent hours stoking that anger, feeding it, using it to justify firing her. She'd lied, violated his trust, overstepped every boundary. He was right to send her away. But underneath the anger was something worse. Something he'd been running from for 4 years. Fear. Fear that she was right. Fear that every specialist who told him his daughters were mirroring his grief had been telling the truth. Fear that he'd been killing his children slowly, day by day, with his own pain. At 2:07 a.m., Vincent gave up on sleep. He pulled on his robe and walked downstairs, his bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. The house was tomb quiet. It had been for 4 years. He found himself standing in the hallway outside Natalie's office. The door was closed. It had been closed since the day she died. He'd asked the cleaning staff not to go in there, had locked it with a key he kept in his desk drawer. The room was frozen in time, exactly as she'd left it the morning she went to the hospital for what was supposed to be a routine procedure. Vincent's hand shook as he pulled the key from his pocket. He hadn't been in this room in 4 years. Couldn't. Every time he'd walked past that door, something in his chest tightened until he couldn't breathe. So he stopped walking past it, changed his route through the house, pretended the room didn't exist. But tonight, he opened it. The air inside smelled stale. Dust motes floated in the moonlight, streaming through the window. Everything was exactly as Natalie had left it. Her laptop closed on the desk, a half-empty cup of coffee, long since dried to a ring of residue. Papers spread across the surface showing nursery designs and baby furniture catalogs. Vincent's throat closed. He stepped inside, his legs unsteady. His eyes moved over the space, the bookshelf filled with her favorite novels, the framed photos of their wedding, the throw blanket she used to wrap around her shoulders when she worked late. Then he saw it. On the center of her desk, partially hidden under a catalog, a leather journal. Dark brown, worn at the edges, about the size of his hand. He'd never seen it before. Vincent's hands trembled as he picked it up. The leather was soft under his fingers. He opened it slowly, afraid of what he might find. The first entry was dated February 3rd, the day they found out Natalie was pregnant. Vincent and I went for the confirmation scan today. 3 heartbeats. 3. We're having triplets. I watched his face when the technician told us, and I've never seen him look more terrified and more joyful at the same time. He held my hand so tight, I thought my fingers might break. On the drive home, he kept saying, 3 daughters. Oh my God, Natalie. 3. I told him we'd be fine. We'd figure it out together. We always do. Vincent felt tears burn behind his eyes. But he kept reading. The early entries were full of joy. Discussions about names, grace, hope, faith. Arguments about nursery colors. Natalie wanted lavender. Vincent had lobbied for pale yellow. Plans for the future. Dreams about who their daughters would become. Vincent wants to teach them to play chess. I told him they need to learn to walk first, but he's already planning tournaments and strategies. He's going to be such a good father. I can see it in the way he talks to them through my belly, the way his face lights up when they kick. Vincent's vision blurred. He remembered those conversations, remembered pressing his hands against Natalie's stomach, feeling 3 tiny lives moving inside her. Talking to them about everything and nothing because he was so excited to be their father. Then the entries changed. October 15th. The swelling is getting worse. Dr. Morrison wants to monitor me more closely. Preeclampsia, she called it. Vincent is pretending everything's fine, acting like it's just a precaution. But I see the fear in his eyes. I see the way his hands shake when he thinks I'm not looking. He's terrified of losing me. And God help me, I'm terrified too. Not for myself. For what this will do to him if something goes wrong. Vincent's hands clenched around the journal. November 3rd. The doctors are talking about early delivery. The girls would be premature but viable. I'm scared. Not of the surgery. I trust Dr. Morrison. I'm scared of what happens if I don't make it. Vincent isn't built for loss. When his father died, he shut down for months. I watched him turn into someone I barely recognized. And that was just his father. If something happens to me, God, I can't think about it. But I have to. I have to prepare for that possibility. November 20th. I've started recording videos for the girls. Messages for birthdays, graduations, weddings. All the moments I might miss. Vincent doesn't know. I hide the iPad when he comes home. I'm also trying to write down everything I want him to know about raising them, their favorite songs, how to comfort them, what makes them feel safe. But I'm terrified it won't be enough. I'm terrified he'll forget how to love at all. Vincent felt something crack in his chest. She'd known. Even before she died, Natalie had known exactly what would happen to him. December 1st. I had another ultrasound today. Vincent came with me. I watched him talking to the babies through my belly, singing that ridiculous song he made up about 3 little girls who conquered the world. The technician was crying. I was crying. Vincent was grinning like an idiot. And I thought, he's going to be such a good father. As long as he doesn't let grief turn him into stone. As long as he remembers that being broken is okay. That showing emotion is okay. That our daughters need him to be human, not perfect. Vincent's breath came in short, sharp gasps. His wife had seen everything. His fear, his weakness, his potential for self-destruction. And she'd loved him anyway. He almost closed the journal, almost couldn't bear to read more. But he forced himself to turn to the final entry. December 12th, the day before the surgery. Tomorrow I go in for the C-section. Darby's Pedro's daughter, Morrison, says the girls are in distress, that we can't wait any longer. I know I won't come back. I can feel it in my body. The way you know things you shouldn't be able to know. My blood pressure is too high. My organs are failing. They'll save the babies, but they won't save me. Vincent, if you ever read this, and knowing you probably will, years from now, when you finally get brave enough to open this door. Please hear me. Our daughters will need you to be broken. They'll need you to cry, to be scared, to not have all the answers. Don't hide from them. Don't lock yourself away in your grief like you did when your father died. Don't pretend everything is fine when it's not. Children don't need perfect parents who never make mistakes. They need present parents who show up every day, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. I forgive you already. For whatever you think you should have done differently, for whatever guilt you're carrying, for however long it took you to find this journal and face what I've written here. I forgive you. Now do what I can't. Forgive yourself. Show our girls that life after loss is still life. That grief doesn't mean you stop loving. That being sad doesn't mean you can't also be joyful. Love them the way I loved you, fearlessly, imperfectly, completely. Take care of them, Vincent, and take care of yourself. You're going to need both to survive this. I love you. Forever. Natalie. The journal slipped from Vincent's hands and hit the floor with a dull thud. He stood there in his dead wife's office, surrounded by her things, by the life they'd planned together, by all the dreams that had died on an operating table 4 years ago. And something inside him, something that had been frozen solid since the moment a doctor told him, "I'm sorry, we did everything we could," finally shattered. Vincent collapsed to his knees, a sound tearing from his throat that didn't sound human. He pressed his forehead to the floor, his hands gripping the carpet like it was the only thing keeping him from falling into an abyss. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "Natalie, I'm so sorry. I couldn't do it. I couldn't keep my promise. I tried, I swear I tried. But every time I looked at them, all I saw was you. All I felt was the pain of losing you. And I couldn't." His voice broke completely. "I couldn't love them without it destroying me. So I stopped trying. I let them disappear. I let them become ghosts like me. And you knew. God, you knew I'd do this. You told me not to, and I did it anyway." He cried like he hadn't cried since the funeral. Cried like he should have cried every day for 4 years but didn't because he was too afraid that if he started, he'd never stop. Cried until his throat was raw and his body was shaking and there was nothing left inside him but the truth he'd been running from. His daughters weren't disabled. They were mirroring him. Every specialist had been right. Kiara had been right. And he'd been too terrified to face it. Vincent didn't know how long he stayed there on the floor of Natalie's office. Long enough for his tears to dry, long enough for his breathing to slow, long enough for the grief to transform into something else. Not healing, not yet, but determination. He pulled himself up, his body aching like he'd run a marathon. He picked up the journal from where it had fallen, held it against his chest. Then he looked around the room one more time. Really looked at it. This had been Natalie's space, her sanctuary, her place to dream and plan and love their family. And he'd locked it away, like a coffin. "I'm going to fix this," Vincent whispered to the empty room, to Natalie's ghost, to himself. "I don't know how, but I'm going to fix it. I'm going to be the father you believed I could be. I swear it." The first light of dawn was breaking through the window when Vincent finally left the office. He walked upstairs to his bedroom, found his phone on the nightstand. His hands were steadier now. His breathing was calmer. But his heart was pounding as he pulled up Kiara's contact information. He stared at her number for a long time, thinking about everything he'd said to her. The anger, the accusations, the command to leave and never come back. She'd been right about everything, and he'd punished her for telling him the truth. Vincent pressed the call button before he could talk himself out of it. It rang once, twice, 3 times. He was about to hang up when he heard her voice, cautious, exhausted, confused. "Mr. Hartwell, come back." Vincent's voice was raw, broken. "Please, come back." There was a long silence on the other end. "It's 5:30 in the morning," Kiara said quietly. "I know. I'm sorry, He stopped, forced himself to say what he should have said the moment she told him the truth. "You were right. About everything. About me, about the girls, about what I've been doing to them. You were right, and I was too afraid to hear it." Another pause. "What changed?" Vincent looked down at the journal still clutched in his hand. "I found something. Something my wife left for me. Something I should have read 4 years ago. And I need your help." His voice cracked. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to be what they need. But I want to try. Please, help me try." He heard Kiara's breath hitch on the other end of the line. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Because this isn't going to be easy, Mr. Hartwell. This is going to hurt. This is going to require you to face everything you've been running from. And I won't enable you if you're not ready to do that work." "I'm sure," Vincent said. And for the first time in 4 years, he meant it. "Come back, please." The sun broke fully over the horizon, filling Vincent's room with golden light. "I'll be there in an hour," Kiara said softly. Vincent closed his eyes. "Thank you." After they hung up, he walked to his daughter's rooms. All 3 doors were closed. He opened Grace's first, the oldest, the one who'd grabbed his thumb in that moment weeks ago that had felt like a miracle. She was sleeping, perfectly still, perfectly silent. Vincent walked to her bedside and knelt down. His hand shook as he reached out and gently touched her hair. "I'm here," he whispered. "Daddy's here, and I'm never leaving again." Grace didn't wake, didn't stir, didn't respond. But Vincent stayed there anyway, his hand on his daughter's head, waiting for Kiara to arrive, waiting to learn how to save his children by finally learning how to save himself. Kiara drove through the misty dawn, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, replaying Vincent's tremulous voice over and over. "Come back, please." She arrived at the estate just after sunrise, unsure what she'd find or whether she was truly welcome. The staff greeted her with cautious smiles. Word had already spread. She changed into her uniform, smoothed her hair, rehearsed the script she always used for new beginnings, but found it lacked all conviction. This time, she wasn't starting fresh. She was returning to a battlefield, haunted by what they'd almost lost. Vincent was in the kitchen, sitting at the island in his pajamas, half-drunk coffee cooling beside his hand. He looked up as she entered, and his eyes, red, exhausted, hollowed by grief, met hers. "Why did you change your mind?" Kiara asked softly, arms folded to brace herself. Vincent shook his head, voice rough. "I can't explain it all. I read something. You were right. About everything." Kiara studied him. She saw the cracks in his armor, the void where anger had seeped out and left only regret. "That's exactly where we need to start," she said, with honesty. Will you let me help you? Vincent's nod was almost a surrender. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted. None of us do, Kiara replied gently. But we try. At 7 a.m., Kiara brought the girls down. Grace, Hope, and Faith were dressed in pastel pajamas, small hands clutching worn stuffed animals. Their eyes found Vincent instantly and, as always, froze. An unfamiliar man stood before them. Not the distant shadow from behind a glass wall, but their father, disheveled and vulnerable in morning light, as unprepared for this day as they were. Kiara set up breakfast at the table, oatmeal and bananas. She stood behind Vincent, handed him a spoon and bowl, her voice barely more than a whisper. Would you like to help feed them? His hands shook as he sat before Grace. She stared at him, wide-eyed and silent. He tried spooning oatmeal, trembling so badly that the food dripped onto her shirt on the fourth bite. Vincent panicked, reaching for a napkin. I'm so sorry. Sweetheart, I didn't. I'm sorry. And then Grace's hand moved. She reached up, her fingers light as air, and touched his wrist. Just for a second. But it was enough. Vincent froze, unable to breathe, and looked at Kiara with wild, hopeful wonder. Kiara's eyes filled with tears. Keep going, she whispered. He finished breakfast, Grace's fingers resting on his shaking hand until the bowl was empty. Afterward, she withdrew to her shell, but her touch lingered in the space between them, a small miracle. Kiara set Hope and Faith at the piano rug in the living room. She drew Vincent over, opened Natalie's playlist on her phone, and pressed play. Soft jazz, piano, saxophone, gentle and warm, filled the air. Your turn, she said, holding out a hand. Vincent hesitated, awkward as a child, but knelt on the rug beside Isabel. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted. None of us do, Kiara echoed. He pulled Isabel close and began swaying to the music, hesitant, self-conscious, but present. Isabel's body was stiff at first, resisting as always. But slowly, her head came to rest on his chest, just for a second. And it was everything. Kiara helped him gather Grace and Hope. She sang along, badly, laughing when she forgot the words. Vincent, feeling ridiculous and terrified and alive, hummed under his breath. Small victories began to surface. When the music played again, Mirabelle, her legs long silent, kicked softly, the smallest response, but unmistakable. Grace reached for Vincent's face when he held her, her tiny fingers brushing his cheek. Faith made sounds, not words, but hums, little strains of melody that felt like hope trying to break through. Vincent came home early every day for 3 days. He fed the girls, sat with them while Kiara sang and played music, swayed on the rug, sang off-key, and lost himself in moments that had once felt impossible. He felt laughter bubbling in his throat, rusty but real. He tickled Hope and got a half smile. He made silly faces, played with blocks, talked to Grace about chess strategies she was too young to understand. He told stories about Natalie, apologies woven in without shame. For the first time, Vincent allowed his daughters to see him sad, uncertain, imperfect. And for the first time, something changed in their eyes. They began to respond, not dramatically, not with movie magic miracles, but with small sacred signs of life. A hand reaching, a foot twitching, a soft hum. Kiara watched, quiet and steady, guiding Vincent through the basics of connection, reinforcing every tiny breakthrough with gentle praise, gradually building on each moment without pressure. Kiara used every ounce of her training, positive reinforcement, graded exposure to new situations, and no direct pressure to speak or move. When Grace reached out, Kiara smiled and responded as if she'd said a word. When Faith hummed, Kiara quietly praised her out of earshot, never embarrassing her, never forcing the moment to become more than she could handle. Vincent threw himself into the new routine. He spoke to the girls the way Natalie had, narrating his actions, sharing thoughts, asking questions, letting silence fill in the gaps when words disappeared. At night, Vincent recorded everything on his phone. Videos of the small victories, the sounds, the movements. Sending clips to the specialists who had long since given up. "Look what happens when you don't stop trying," he wrote. After 3 days, Vincent stood in the living room, exhausted but lighter, watching Kiara read a picture book to the girls as they sat clustered around her, listening, eyes alert. For the first time, the house didn't feel so quiet. It felt full, awkward, messy, fragile, but undeniably alive. Kiara found Vincent staring at them, tears in his eyes. He couldn't bring himself to speak. Every word felt too big or too small. So Kiara put a hand on his arm and said, "You're keeping your promise, Vincent. You're teaching them to live again." Vincent nodded, heart pounding with the realization that maybe, just maybe, he could do this. Not perfectly, not without fear, but honestly. "I think I'm keeping my promise. Finally," he whispered. In that moment, hope returned. Not as a miracle, but as a quiet determination that life could begin again, one imperfect morning at a time. 2 weeks in, everything accelerated. It started small. Mirabelle sat up without her adaptive chair, just for 30 seconds before her muscles tired. But 30 seconds was a lifetime, compared to 4 years of stillness. Grace grabbed a toy Vincent had placed in front of her, turning the wooden block over in her hands, like she was learning what curiosity felt like. Faith babbled constantly now. Sounds a 1-year-old should make, ba 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 and da da da, filling the silence that had suffocated this house for so long. Vincent documented everything. He recorded video after video on his phone, Mirabelle kicking her legs to Chopin, Grace reaching for his face during feeding time, Faith humming along when Kiara sang. He sent them to the specialists who'd examined his daughters years ago, each message carrying the same pointed truth. Look what happens when you don't stop trying. The responses came quickly. Dr. Morrison from Johns Hopkins wanted to visit immediately. "Mr. Hartwell, this is extraordinary. We need to study what's happening, document the recovery process, understand the mechanisms. This could change how we approach developmental trauma." Vincent read the email twice, then deleted it. He typed back, "They're not lab subjects. They're my daughters." Dr. Patel from Boston called personally. "Vincent, I understand your hesitation, but what you're experiencing could help thousands of children. Just let us observe." "No." Vincent's voice was firm. "They've been observed enough, tested enough. What they need now is to live." On the 15th day, Vincent was on the floor with Faith, building block towers the way Kiara had taught him. "Can you knock them down, baby girl?" he asked, stacking red and blue blocks into a wobbly tower. Faith's hand moved slowly, deliberately. She pushed the blocks. They tumbled across the rug. "Good job." Vincent rebuilt the tower. "Let's try again." They did it 8 times. Each time, Faith's movements got more confident, more intentional. On the 8th try, something miraculous happened. Faith didn't just knock down the blocks. She looked up at Vincent, really looked at him, eyes bright and focused, and smiled. Not the ghost of a smile. A real smile, wide and genuine and full of light. Then she laughed. A clear, pure, joyful sound, that Vincent hadn't heard in 4 years, a sound he'd forgotten his daughters could make. Vincent froze, his hands trembling over the scattered blocks. "Kiara!" His voice cracked. "Kiara, come here." She laughed. Faith just laughed. Kiara rushed in from the kitchen, dish towel still in her hands. She dropped to her knees beside them, tears already streaming down her face. Vincent rebuilt the tower with shaking hands. "Do it again, sweetheart. Show Kiara." Faith knocked the blocks down, and this time her laugh came easier, louder, a sound of pure delight that echoed through the room like bells. Vincent pulled Faith into his arms and just held her, his whole body shaking with emotion. "That's my girl," he whispered into her hair. "That's my brave, beautiful girl." Kiara wiped her eyes, smiling through her tears. "She's coming back," she said softly. "They all are." That evening, after the girls were asleep, Kiara sat in the kitchen going through her emails when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Miss Osei?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. "This is Dr. Chen from Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I'm calling about your sister, Amara." Kiara's heart stopped. "Is she?" "She's responding," Dr. Chen interrupted, and Kiara could hear the smile in her voice. "The new protocol is working. Her white blood cell counts are stabilizing. Her latest scans show the tumors shrinking. It's early, but Amara is responding beautifully." Kiara pressed her hand to her mouth, tears spilling over. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. She's not out of the woods yet. But for the first time in 2 years, I can tell you with confidence, your sister is going to be okay." After they hung up, Kiara sat in the kitchen crying, relief and joy and exhaustion all hitting her at once. She'd been carrying this weight for so long, holding her family together while drowning in her own fear. And now, finally, there was hope. Vincent found her like that, shoulders shaking, face in her hands. "Kiara?" He sat down across from her, concern etched in his features. "What's wrong? What happened?" She looked up, tried to smile through her tears. "My sister, Amara. Her treatment is working. The doctors, they said she's responding. She's going to be okay." Vincent felt something shift in his chest. He'd known Kiara had a sick sister, known she'd taken this job out of desperation. But he'd never fully understood what she was carrying. This woman who'd saved his daughters had been drowning in her own pain the entire time, and she'd never let it stop her from showing up every single day. "I'm so glad," Vincent said quietly. Then, after a pause, "Let me help." Kiara shook her head. "You're already paying me?" "No." Vincent leaned forward. "Whatever Amara needs, the best doctors, experimental treatments, facility transfers, anything. Let me help. Please. You saved my daughters' lives. Let me help your family the way you've helped mine." Kiara's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Mr. Hartwell, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." His voice was firm but gentle. "My daughters are laughing again because of you. The least I can do is make sure your sister gets every possible chance to laugh too." Kiara covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed. "Thank you," she whispered. "God, thank you." They sat in the quiet kitchen for a long moment. Two people who'd both been drowning, finally learning to breathe again. The house phone rang, shattering the peace. Vincent frowned. Nobody called the landline except telemarketers. He almost didn't answer, but old habits made him reach for it. "Hello?" "Vincent." The voice on the other end was imperious, familiar and laced with disapproval. "It's your mother." Vincent's stomach dropped. "Mother? This is unexpected. I've been hearing rumors," Eleanor Hartwell said without preamble, "that you haven't been at the office, that you've hired some new caregiver, that things have changed with the girls." Vincent's jaw tightened. His mother had never approved of how he was handling Grace, Hope, and Faith. She'd been pushing for years to have them move to Meadowbrook Institute, a specialized residential facility for children with severe developmental delays. "Things have changed," Vincent said carefully. "For the better. I'll be the judge of that. I'm flying in tomorrow. I expect to see the girls." "Mother, that's not—" "Tomorrow, Vincent, 10 o'clock. We'll discuss their future properly." Eleanor's tone left no room for argument. "I've already made preliminary arrangements with Meadowbrook. If the girls aren't showing significant improvement, we need to have a serious conversation about what's best for them." The line went dead. Vincent set the phone down slowly, his hands trembling. Kiara was watching him with concern. "What is it?" she asked. "My mother." Vincent ran a hand through his hair. "She's coming tomorrow. She wants to see the girls. She's been pushing for years to have them institutionalized. If she doesn't think they're progressing enough—" He trailed off, but the fear in his eyes finished the sentence. Kiara stood up, crossed to where he sat. "Vincent, look at me. Your daughters have made incredible progress. In 2 weeks, we've seen changes most specialists said were impossible. Grace is engaging with toys. Mirabelle can sit up. Faith is laughing. But they're not talking yet, not walking, not doing the things 4-year-olds are supposed to do." Vincent's voice was tight with panic. "What if my mother doesn't see what I see? What if she just sees 3 children who are still delayed and decides they'd be better off somewhere else?" Kiara took his hands in hers. "Then we show her the truth. We show her that your daughters aren't broken, they're healing. And healing takes time." Vincent wanted to believe her. But he'd seen his mother dismiss specialists, reject diagnoses, bulldoze over every obstacle when she thought she was right. Eleanor Hartwell was a force of nature, and she'd never understood why Vincent insisted on keeping the girls at home. "Tomorrow will either prove everything," Vincent said quietly, "or destroy it all." That night, Vincent couldn't sleep. He went to each of his daughters' rooms, watching them sleep peacefully for the first time in years. Grace's hand was curled around the stuffed rabbit he'd given her that afternoon. Mirabelle's breathing was deep and even. Faith's mouth was slightly open, making soft sounds even in sleep. They were coming back to him. Slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably. And tomorrow, his mother would decide if that was enough. Vincent returned to his room and pulled up the videos on his phone. Faith laughing, Grace reaching, Mirabelle kicking. He watched them over and over, trying to memorize every moment, every tiny miracle. "Please," he whispered to no one in particular, to God, to Natalie, to the universe. "Please let her see what I see. Please don't let this be taken away." But as dawn broke over the estate, Vincent knew the truth. Some things couldn't be controlled, couldn't be planned for. Tomorrow would come, whether he was ready or not, and everything he'd fought to build could crumble in an instant. Morning arrived heavy with dread. Vincent woke before dawn, dressing without thought, half his mind lost in the past, the other bracing for what was to come. He found Kiara already in the kitchen, wrapping Faith in a fresh set of clothes, her own nerves hidden behind practiced calm. Down the hall, Grace, Hope, and Faith sensed the tension. Even the air felt different, as if the house itself was waiting for judgment. They moved quietly through breakfast, their eyes distant, their hands hesitant. At 10 sharp, Eleanor Hartwell's town car rolled through the gates, gliding to a stop in front of the estate. Vincent stood on the porch, forcing himself not to shrink beneath his mother's gaze as she stepped out. Impeccable, steely, every inch the matriarch, who'd built half their legacy from sheer force of will. She entered with barely a greeting, surveying the rooms with clinical detachment. "Where are my granddaughters?" she demanded. "In the living room," Vincent replied, voice thin but steady. Eleanor swept past him, shoes clicking over marble as she arrived to find Kiara seated cross-legged on the rug, the triplets in a small circle before her. Sunlight spilled through tall windows, catching in their hair. She studied them, her expression folded into disappointment. "They're still the same. Vincent, you called me here on the promise of improvement. All I see are 3 silent children and a caregiver who looks ready to cry." Vincent moved to defend them, words tumbling out. "No, Mother, they're not the same. You haven't been here. You haven't seen—" Eleanor cut him off. "I've made arrangements with Meadowbrook Institute. They specialize in children with profound developmental delays. It's time, Vincent. They'll get round-the-clock medical care, therapies, everything you and your parade of nannies could never provide. This isn't a home, it's a holding ground for heartbreak." Kiara's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Vincent stepped closer to his mother, fighting for composure. "You're wrong. They're healing. You just need—" But then, Faith made a sound. Not a babble, not a hum. Something clearer, deeper, a word attempting to form. "Da, da." The room stopped. Eleanor froze, mouth open. Vincent dropped to his knees, his voice hoarse with hope. "Faith? Baby? Say it again." Kiara, ever gentle, quietly started Natalie's music. The Chopin Nocturne. The piano filled the air, soft and shimmering. In the golden hush, 3 things happened at once. Faith crawled, her body straining and trembling, dragging herself across the blanket toward Vincent. Her first true independent movement. Hope pulled herself up on the coffee table, legs wobbling but sturdy, standing for the first time unguided. Grace looked straight at Vincent and, with effort but clarity, whispered one perfect word. "Dada." Vincent's hands shook as he gathered all 3 girls to him, tears streaming unchecked. They clung to him, moving and reaching and living in a way he'd only dreamed possible. "I love you," Vincent whispered fiercely, voice breaking. "I love you so much. I'm here. I'm never leaving again." Eleanor watched, her imperious poise crumbling. She knelt on the rug beside them, tears streaking her cheeks. "Oh my God. Oh my God, Vincent. You did it." Vincent shook his head. "Kiara did it. She showed me how." But Kiara's response was quiet and firm. "No, Mr. Hartwell, you did this. You chose to come back. You chose to be present. Your daughters didn't need a perfect father. They just needed their father." Eleanor wept, clutching Grace's hand as the music played on. The debate about Meadowbrook dissolved in sunlight and laughter. 6 months passed. Grace, Hope, and Faith flourished, walking, talking, tumbling through the garden at dawn. Medical journals clamored for case studies on psychogenic developmental delay recovery. Vincent shared their story, but always refused the label miracle. He knew better now. Kiara's sister Amara went into remission. Kiara began consulting for Hartwell Industries, helping employees support children with trauma or developmental challenges. Vincent restructured his own life. 3 days each week at home, never missing breakfast, never letting the distance return. The mansion was no longer quiet. It echoed with laughter, songs, and the daily trials of childhood. Every morning, Natalie's Chopin played in the garden. Sunlight falling across tangled hair, crushed grass, and Vincent leading his daughters, teaching them to dance the way Natalie had taught him. They stumbled, giggled, collapsed into piles of joy and forgiveness. Vincent watched his daughters, alive at last, and understood the lesson his wife had tried to teach him. One line scrawled in a faded journal, haunting but true. His daughters hadn't been sick. They'd been waiting for their father to come back to life so they could finally start living theirs.